Then I would like to more formally introduce His Eminence, the Anders Cardinal Arborelius, who is the Catholic Bishop of Stockholm. And you are welcome to sit here, because I think your legs would prefer that. And, we give you a warm welcome.
Why did God create the world? The old catechism could answer all questions. So, in order that everything created should reflect God's beauty and wisdom and give glory to Him. Today, as always, Christian spirituality should help us to remember this. In our days, we are more aware of the fragility of creation, so this truth becomes ever more essential and central. Christians and all people of goodwill are aware of our need of an ecological conversion in order to bring about a more sustainable development. Everyone with an opened eye and heart is aware of the dangerous situation of our poor earth. The need of a deeper dialogue between science and faith could be very fruitful in order to help us to work together for a more sustainable development. A spirituality that emphasizes this ecological accent would be necessary and could prove providential for the future of our world. Such a spirituality could give Christians, and really all people of goodwill, the motivation needed in order to work with more zeal for more sustainable future. Science can give us the facts and the way to work and act, but we need spirituality that give us the pure intention, the motivation, and the inspiration, the open heart to God's grace in order to really convert ourselves to a new way of life, a new way of looking upon creation and taking care of our planet. So I think that's the main task of a spirituality, to really motivate us on a deeper level, because otherwise nothing will happen. Where can we find such a spirituality? Does it really exist, or we have to invent it? Actually, I think there is already such a spirituality, or at least the various accents and ingredients can be found in revelation and tradition. But they have to be more explicitly united and explained in order to offer us such an ecological spirituality. It's nothing really new, but we have to rediscover the spiritual treasures and see how we can adopt them to our contemporary situation and awareness. And indeed, this is what Pope Francis has tried to do with his Laudato Si. Once again, the spirituality of ecology is not so much meant to offer us the concrete measures of how to achieve a more sustainable development. That's science, the facts, reality. The aim of a spirituality is persuade us to be converted to a deeper love of God and His creation, and to make us aware of our privilege of being His co-workers in creation, in His and our world. This is also the reason why Pope Francis over and over again stresses the necessity of uniting this ecological conversion to a conversion to the poor. A sustainable world is meant to be a better world for the poor. The option for the poor is also an option for a sustainable world. This double accent is typical of a Christian ecological spirituality. They belong together. You cannot divide them. But unfortunately, this important point is often forgotten or even denied. In our Christian vision, the poor are always central, because the Lord himself became poor for our salvation. He came to them, and he invites us to be one of them. It's not always so easy to combine an ecological conversion to conversion to the poor, but a spirituality that wants to be Christian is obliged to do so. So Pope Francis comes back to this truth over and over again. And then the fact we all have to become poor in one way or the other. We have to be converted to another way of life, especially in our part of the world. A sustainable future for the world means that some of us have to grow into a more conscious poverty, to accept poverty for ourselves and abstain from some of the resources of creation. And I think that's the difficult fact, to say that all of us have to convert to another way of life. We who live in the richer part of the world, and we know that in practice we destroy more of creation. We have to change our lifestyle and convert ourselves to more simplicity. This is why an ecological spirituality has to persuade us and give us the motivation, the intention, and the inspiration to become poorer and give up a lot of things that are dear and quite natural to us. And we know no politician could say that. He will never get many votes for that. And that's why we can learn so much from you in the Sami culture. The scandal of the cross is never easy to proclaim, but it is needed for our salvation and for that of all the world. It is hard to accept, but it's absolutely necessary. When we try to formulate an all-inclusive Christian spirituality for a sustainable future for the world and for ourselves, we have to build it upon the basic truths of our Christian faith: creation, fall into sin, incarnation, cross, resurrection. We have to see that all those basic truths of our faith have implication for a more sustainable way of living. And that could be a very thrilling experience, to see how the basic truths of our faith help us to really build up a spirituality of a more sustainable future. The Bible and the tradition can help us to see that there are already so many bits and pieces that help us to be really engaged for the action for sustainability. At the same time, this spirituality, like any other Christian spirituality, helps us to grow closer to God and live in divine intimacy, to see that we come closer to God if we really try to live according to this more ecological way of life. So I think that's the task of each one of us, to see, how can I, according to my faith, be inspired, be motivated to change my way of life and to help the society to do the same. Because as Christians, we are in a minority in our society, but if we really try to live according to the gospel and its implication for a more sustainable way of life, we can also inspire people. It could even become a kind of new evangelization, to show that our faith helps us to live in a more simple way, in a more ecological way. So that's my advice to all of us, that we try to see how we, according to our faith, can find means of becoming poorer, simpler, not using all the resources of creation for our own sake, but have this openness for the poor, for creation. So, finally, what's essential in a Christian ecological spirituality is nature, the planet, the earth, but also those less privileged, the poor. And somehow we need this combination in order to find our way of living a spirituality that is more ecological and helps us to build up a more sustainable future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cardinal Anders Arborelius. Now you turn to your neighbor and you discern whether you have noticed something new. Was there something that struck you in what the Catholic Bishop of Stockholm said? Was there something that touched you or struck you? Please share with your neighbor.
Thank you very much. I was struck by the letter by Pope Francis and by your speech, by the strong stress on solidarity with the poor and justice issues, and I really think that is one of the most important contributions from the Catholic Church worldwide today to our society and our churches here in Sweden, that someone really raises the voices of speaks for the poor and the justice issues in the world. But I also think that one important contribution from the old spiritual traditions of Orthodox and Roman Catholic kind is the community life of in convents and cloisters, and you didn't mention that, but I somehow feel that these communities can be some kind of counterculture where in a way, like the Sami people's cultures, the community life can be a sort of alternative to our Western consumer culture. Can you comment on that, please?
Well, thank you very much for that. Of course, that's a very dear thing for me, community life, because I spent 27 years in a monastery. And there you learn how to abstain from so many things that are essential for people of today. And of course, you cannot oblige people to abstain from all those things if they don't have a strong spiritual urge to follow Christ, to help him to redeem the world. So I would say there is a classical word in monastic spirituality, mortification, to die away from the old man, to let go of all those things that are not really necessary. And we know this is not so easy to explain to people of today. But I would say, if we want to have a sustainable future for the world, mortification is needed. And only if you have a strong love for the Lord, for Christ, you can really feel the need to die away from all these things. And I think that's also the main difficulty, to try to convince people of the necessity of mortification. But if you live a kind of community life, whether in a convent, a parish, a family, you learn how to mortify yourself, because that's one of the graces a relationship, that you take a step back and you give the central place for another one. But we know that's somehow against our individualistic culture of today, when we are told you have to think about your own position, you have to take place, you have to do. So it needs a kind of conversion also to community. So I'm very grateful that you reminded me of that. And somehow we see that many people of today are interested in community life in one way or the other. But it can be very hard for a person brought up in our individualistic society to learn how to live together. And that's what we see, that many try monastic life, but somehow they don't have the psychological stability to die away from their own way of living and thinking. But you're right, I should have mentioned that. Thank you for reminding me.
We should have had Royce Grant on here, because maybe he had understood some of the words of the cardinal, that mortification, and he says that to die in the age of Anthropocene, that we have to die, our culture has to die, our civilization has to die in order to something new to come. I read him more negatively, though myself, but I can hear that there is a resemblance in your speech about mortification. Is there any more question? Yes, there. Hmm?
Can you raise your hand again? Yes, we talked about that, like living simple can gain the purpose of like helping other people and the world, but it's also a way of like coming closer to God and your own happiness, you know, not find the happiness in to buy things or, you know, like outside yourself, but it's a way of, yeah, coming closer to your own happiness, maybe to God. And we talked about that can really be a resource from our perspective, like from faith, that because maybe it can be hard if you just do things. It's a nice way to do things for other people and for the earth, but it can be hard also. But if you think that maybe you gain something of it too, you know, for yourself, like that it's a way of coming closer. Does it make sense? I don't know if yeah. We talked about that. I don't have a question, but it was just a comment.
Well, that's very true. And the aim of every spirituality in a Christian sense is that we grow closer and closer into a deep relationship with God. And I think that's the inspiration and the motivation to live a life according to the gospel in simplicity and more poverty, and to abstain from abusing the earth. So it goes together. And the more you try to grow into a deep relationship with God, the more you see that you don't need to use all the resources in that way. So I think a Christian spirituality stresses both these accents. You grow closer to God, and then you see that you can also change your lifestyle. You don't need to misuse and abuse creation in the same way. So I think you are quite on the same line. Thank you.
We have one more question here.
Hi. I just want to say thank you for saying that that we need to become poor, because as we've been talking about, I don't think this is something that we very often talk about even in the church, without reformulating it or making it beautiful in some ways, because becoming poor for us is dangerous, it's a dread, it's something that we absolutely don't want to do. And it's a solution that goes against capitalism and
the solutions to the climate crisis that it provides, such as buying more paper straws or whatever. But to actually restrain, I think that's more difficult for us than we can understand. I don't know, I think that's where the Christian motivation comes in, because we talked a little bit about doomsday and climate crisis as a doomsday, but the sadness about that is that this doomsday will not affect the people responsible in the first hand. So for us, it might be more of a doomsday to actually change our ways. And that's where the Christian motivation comes in, because the logical thing for us is to do nothing and to let the third world take the consequences. So I just want to say thank you for that.
Yes, it's true. It's not so popular for politicians to speak about you have to be more poor, you have to long for a life of poverty. But somehow we know that in our world of today, we have to see that the rich part of the world cannot continue to become richer and richer, and the poor world becoming poorer and poorer. That will create many, many conflicts, as we see already now. And if we Christians, in our humble way, could try to show that more simplicity, more poverty can also help us to come closer to each other, that relationships can be more profound, and those can enrich us more than the material things. But I think that's a very wonderful task, and we could just try to do what we can in our surrounding. And even if we don't achieve many palpable effects, as we can see, we can do the little thing that is needed to help the world to be a more sustainable world.
Pope John Paul II, he spoke about structural sin.
Yeah.
And the Catholic Church is not just individual believers, it's also structures. And how is it in the structures of the Catholic Church about divestment of fossil fuels shares? Is there divestment of the stocks within the Catholic Church, so you cannot own shares that invest in fossil fuels?
Yes, that's true, that dioceses and religious orders try to invest in a just way. But we know the economical system is very complicated, and sometimes it can be very difficult to know if that company really is a clean one. So that's one of the main difficulties. If we live in a world that is built upon money, upon investments, it's really a very, very difficult thing to know how you should invest in a very good way. And but we have to do what we can in order not to invest in the bad companies. But as I said, it's not very easy.
Good luck.
Yeah.
My name is Per Ribbing, and you touched upon the issue there, the issue of power. To me, the Catholic Church is a very, very powerful organization. You're all over the world, and you have lots of money. If you want help with divesting, there is a global divestment movement. I'm sure they would love to help the Catholic Church to divest from fossil fuels. That would be great. So my question is about power. If we want to change the world, it will not be sufficient that you and I go poor. I'm already doing that. I'm sure you are as well. but how does the Catholic Church all over the world use their money, use their power, use their political influence to actually change things? Just look at the US. The Catholic Church in the US is big and is strong, and that country is not divesting, it's doing the very opposite.
No, you're right. Unfortunately, in many parts of the world, the church can be very rich, rather powerful. In Sweden, it's not the case. But now, thanks to the new laws, we have a way of surviving. But we have passed through centuries of persecution and difficulties. So here in Sweden, but as you said, in the United States, the church is also quite a powerful institution. And we know that the church in the United States is also passing through a very difficult period due to the abuse crisis. And but we also know that in the United States there are some of the dioceses, some of the religious orders are very eager to promote a more just society. Maybe the Jesuits are more informed about how they work there, but I know that many of the religious orders have universities, they have hospitals. Most of the free hospitals in the United States are Catholic, and at the border, many of the organizations are trying to help the immigrants. But it's true, if you live in a capitalistic society, somehow it's very easy to get entangled into the structures. And of course that's a constant effort not to be swallowed up by the society. And as you said, the Catholic Church is a worldwide organization, and it's very, very different, the situation of the Church. But in some parts of the world, the Catholic Church has influence and could have the possibility to also change the attitudes. But the Church is also full of people of all kinds. And some are more eager to work for that, some not. But Pope Francis is always telling all the faithful how to really work for a sustainable and just society. But unfortunately, not everyone is listening. And that's, of course, our difficulty, that not all of us are really following Christ and the gospel.
Thank you very much, Cardinal.